It was announced on December 1st that SK Telecom was going to be signing Huni, the former top laner for Immortals in 2016 and Fnatic top laner of 2015, as their new starting top laner in the LCK for 2017. This comes after most people were speculating other free agents like Someday or Flame were going to be picked up by the team. It came out of left field. And I can actually talk a little bit about what happened as far as like behind the scenes. It was very last minute. And so now what's interesting raised up that this completes the SK Telecom roster. We have Huni in the top lane, Peanut in the jungle, Faker in the mid lane, Bang and Wolf at the bottom lane in their respective roles. And so this completes the SK Telecom roster for 2017, and it raises a few questions, it raises some excitement, and ultimately, it's something that not many of us saw coming. It really did come together last minute with Huni receiving some offers. Again, people had different guesses as to what happened, but ESPN reported on it yesterday through Jacob Wolf, and then it was later confirmed through various social media with Huni posing with the team in Jersey and himself changing his own Twitter tag from Immortals Huni to SK Telecom Huni. So we're now going to have that element confirmed into the LCK, and we're going to see Huni actually return to his home country to play in that league, a league that he hasn't actually officially played in before. Well, there is one little cool historical detail to add to this story, and that is that Huni actually trialed for SK Telecom back in 2014. I shouldn't say trialed, auditioned for part of top lane, and he actually did pass an audition. However, he would have been on the roster as a substitute top laner to Marin. This was the lineup that was going into 2015 for SK Telecom, and Huni decided not to take that offer. He wanted a starting job offer, and that's why we got the Fnatic role. And so now he's coming back a few years after the fact, after SK Telecom has parted ways with Duke, which the first thing we'll do is compare Huni and Duke as top laners very briefly before we get into some of the more implications around this thing. But ultimately, this move is going to be something I think that we're finally going to get to see how kkOma actually handles some players, just given the personality of Huni and the stigma that does follow Huni. So first off, let's talk about the move itself and what we think about it. As far as just gameplay mechanics go, we're going to remove the personalities involved behind this one. So Huni as a player is, I think we can describe him in a few aspects as somewhat similar to Duke, but then there are some major differences. The similarities really start with the laning phase. They're both very strong solo laners. They're very capable of handling a lane by themselves and not really requiring jungle pressure just to survive a lane. Now, where they begin to differ, though, is how they then use their resources. Duke is he's kind of just stalwart. He doesn't really need that attention up top. He'll win the 1v1, usually on his own. Doesn't really need that many ganks so often. Whereas Huni wants to crush the lane. Huni wants to be able to take that advantage and seize it and get into a position where then he can move on to hard carry. He likes to do that. He likes to be the carry. And then, in the mid-game, there's a very distinct distinction between these two players. Distinction, okay, kid. Where we have Duke is kind of more happy just to be off on his own split pushing, and he had troubles with SK Telecom throughout the year, joining his team through teleport. He had poor teleport timings, poor teleport positionings, things like that. Whereas Huni has been very good with teleport flanks, at least within North America, a region that has decidedly less macro play than a region like Korea. So we'll have to see how this sort of translates over to the Korean scene when Huni comes in there and he's going up against a completely different pool of top laners where he has to compete with the likes of Smeb. He's going to have to go up against Kuve, who's really come into his own. We don't know where Duke, Someday, Flame, Expression, we don't know where these kind of players are landing currently, so we'll have to wait and see where all the musical chairs fall within the Korean shuffle. So, but ultimately, Huni is a little better at playing the global game, but Duke tends to be a bit, focused more on split pushing. He plays very well around that one. Both of them have had a tendency of being solo killed often. Usually it's Duke misplaying a 1v1, and whereas Huni, he overcommits for a dive of sorts. As well as also that you just have them playing two different styles. Now, this is where we're going to talk about the personalities. So we talked about the mechanics, let's move into personalities. So, Duke was a quiet personality. He was, again, stoic is a really good word, I think, that to describe Duke, and that's the impression that I got from him when I interviewed him a few times during the World Championship. Now, when it comes to Huni, however, it's very different. He's louder. He's been known as, kind of being a guy who wants things to be his way, being a little demanding in the voice comms, and he has a reputation built up of being a tilter. Someone, infamously speaking, There is the Spring 2016 LCS semifinals where Immortals played against Team Solomid, and Immortals were expected to defeat Team Solomid, but as the meta had moved into tanks, rather than just having Huni go to tanks, they instead had him try and play carry roles, where he played Lucian, I think Graves was second, and then Gangplank, and then Immortals got 3-0'd. And a lot of criticism was drawn to the organization. It was a lot of it drawn to Huni for like, oh, he's being stubborn, he's not adapting to the meta. I actually know some of the Immortals staff that was on that team at the time, and I know a bit more of the backstory of what went on with that one, and I'm not, free to talk about that. But that's the stigma that's developed around that one. Around Huni in particular. And we've seen this before where, he wants to pick his champion, like he tried picking Riven and Hecarim at the World 2015 Championship, but then when he didn't get to win lanes like he could, when he went up against some of the Korean top laners, like Smeb, for example, in the KU and Fnatic series, and Huni didn't get those wins, he became somewhat of a liability, and so he's been associated with having a mental game problem about not being able to take falling behind so well. He's a player that wants to be ahead, and he gets frustrated, and he'll be overly aggressive as he tries to come back into the game. Duke doesn't really have any of that thing. He's always been a really good role player, and honestly, the best success that Duke has had on SK Telecom is when he's played tanks. And while his team fighting can be, it can vary, his spell usage can be vary. Sometimes his Poppy, for example, looks really clean, really good. Other times, it's pretty bad, and you just see that it's fairly awkward. However, that being said, though, we're looking at the case, though, where Duke was overall fairly consistent, and if you put him on tank top laner, he would be incredibly reliable, and he didn't have to win lane to contribute to his team a whole lot, and he could still play a very important role. Now, Huni, he's capable of playing tanks. I think people kind of forget that. I should actually have pulled up some win rates on that one, but he has played tanks before. But I feel like with the Immortals team comp, they were just more interested in trying to have him carry from the top lane, as he was one of the best players on that squad. So now, though, he has a stigma around him, and now he's going back to Korea, and now he's going to go under kkOma. Now, one thing we have to bring up with kkOma here is that he gets a lot of credit for SK Telecom's successes, and some of that can be absorbed just by, or rather excused by the fact that he has the best player in the world on his team. Like, it would be easy, all of kkOma's titles, all of his victories have been with Faker at the center point of the roster. Faker being in the position in the game that is by far the most consistent to carry from. It is always impactful on the map. It's the shortest lane, has access to all the other side lanes, and so you had the best tool in the world. The best thing right there, you had a jungler that paired very well with it. So he had some pretty good players. But one thing that we always point out with SK Telecom, I think, is that their macro play was always sort of just like counter-punish, especially in 2016 after Marin departed the squad. They never really had like the same sort of shot calling as Rocks, where it was proactive and really aggressive and dynamic, but rather it was like they knew how to punish mistakes, they knew how to react to plays and then get you for it. So, and some of the issues that were with the team have always really been with the team. New players that came into the roster, for example, Blank and Duke, didn't really have any of their issues solved. Blank continued to underperform under important moments following the Spring 2016 final, of course, where he played incredibly well, and he deserves credit for performing as well as he did in that final, especially against like Peanut. And then you have Duke, whose teleport problems were always consistent. Those never really got fixed in any way. Those never got solved. So there's some evidence to suggest that kkOma isn't like this god hand kind of coach that I think a few Fnatic people, I don't see a whole lot of it, to be honest. But there is a potential that kkOma gets a little more credit than is deserved of him, just because he has some really good players in place, and he doesn't have the SK Telecom, whenever they have an issue, it kind of just seems to persist a lot, and it doesn't really seem to go away. So we really have to see how that is. And of course, this is all speculation. I don't know how kkOma talks to the players. I don't know how his entire role is in there, and that's part of the enigma too, is that there's not really a lot known about how kkOma is. But I think that we're going to get a really huge insight into Huni coming into the roster and how that interacts with it, as well as Peanut. I want to bring that point up very briefly. I already posted a video on Peanut, but with Huni and Peanut now coming in, well, I'm going to have to see how this goes. So first off, on paper, I think this roster could actually it has a lot of potential. It has a lot of potential to succeed, and it has a lot of potential to crash and burn. The potential to succeed, you have some really strong, aggressive players on the top side of the map. Faker. It's Faker. Peanut, we've seen him just dazzle throughout the jungle and just kill pretty much everybody. If you give this kid an inch, he takes a mile from you. However, that was something that was also facilitated by how the Rocks Tigers played the game. They pushed lanes aggressively, they collapsed, they had globals to follow up on him. We're going to have to see if SK Telecom can sort of handle that thing. I think with Huni it would be more feasible than if they had Duke, just because Huni is also like that. He likes to be aggressive. He's been fairly good with his global and teleport usage, at least within North America. I want to see how that translates over the LCK. Now, so there's a lot of potential here, actually, to have them kind of emulate a sort of 2015 style where they had this really aggressive top laner who's getting a lot of jungle attention, but rather than a bunch of vision control for him just to control the wave in 1v1, you just get ganks and ganks and ganks, and then you translate that into invades and you snowball, and you can work around the mid lane while the bot lane kind of fends for themselves and plays, a little more defensively, like how the SK Telecom bot lane currently does. So, however, though, there's also some potential for this roster to really fail. For one, I think we got some different clashes of personalities. I'm not going to speak on Peanut just because I don't know how he is behind the scenes. We have this perception that he's very quiet, he's maybe a little bit shy, adorable, but I don't know I don't know how he is on the comms, for example. Whereas Huni, we know he can be he can be loud, he can be really passionate, he can be really emotional at times. So we'd have to see how this team dynamic goes. And this could be a style where everyone's just playing too aggressively and they get overly punished for it and they don't respond properly. And maybe this team doesn't play from behind so well. So we do have to see that one. I do think, though, that with Huni and Peanut in place, and I'm going to mention Peanut on the side, but this is most about Huni, that we're going to finally see how kkOma, we're going to get a really good glimpse into how kkOma operates. How is that? Well, I want to see how Huni's, I'll say mental game problems, so how he composes himself, how he's able to keep his head in the game and things like that. I want to see if that changes at all when he joins SK Telecom. Talking with some people who just have experience with players, they've worked behind the scenes, they've done reporting and things like that. They've told me that a player, a tilting kind of player, once he joins a team that's really good, or he really respects those players on that team, suddenly a lot of those problems go away because they're not so frustrated with their teammates, they're more respectful for them, and then they change a little bit as personality. I think that we could kind of look at Doublelift as an example, going from CLG to Team Solo Mid. So it's very possible that with Huni coming into SK Telecom and you look at the field of what he's going to be playing with, you have Peanut, one of the best junglers in the world. You have Faker, the best mid laner in the world and the greatest player of all time, 3-time world champion. Then you have Bang and Wolf, 2-time world champions, who've gotten to play with Faker, who have also been fairly successful in their career. That's a roster that I think that it's going to be one that commands respect, and it's going to be one where a person's just not going to be frustrated because it's I know how good these guys are, I know what I'm playing with, and so I shouldn't, deflecting blame on them isn't going to look good. I want to look good to these guys, I want to earn their respect, I want to meet their level and their expectations. So we could see Huni changed just a little bit in his personality. Maybe he starts handling loss a little better. Maybe he doesn't require so many resources, and maybe he begins to change as a player. Or there could be some impact with how kkOma comes in and how he's able to coach that. Because if Huni tilts like he has before, like he did on Fnatic, like he has done on Immortal sometime, then there's not really, that's going to put SK Telecom in a bit of a bind. But I think that there's going to be some tools in place for SK Telecom trying to handle that, and I want to see how they handle it. I want to see what happens, because when you think about it, no Western coach has been able to really get that part of Huni and be able to bridge that gap in terms of his personality and get him to not have those issues. So, not Daylor, not... It was Dylan Falco, I think, was Immortal's coach. Forgive me, I should have looked that up, but I'm going to put that bet. It sounds correct to me. None of those Western coaches have really gotten Huni to sort of play around it. Again, the idea being Huni's not going to ever pick a tank he wants to play. He's very picky about the champions that he plays, and I know a few of these for a fact. He's very picky about some champions, some builds, and he's not going to do it if he's not told to. Is that going to persist with kkOma? Is Huni going to just, continue to ride off kkOma? Because you have to think within Korean culture, that doesn't fly. You listen to the coach, or you're not playing at all. So this is going to be really going to see how... if Huni's going to give kkOma that respect, and if kkOma is going to be able to secure that from him, which I think is probably going to happen, and if it doesn't, we're not going to see a lot of Huni. So, with kkOma now, he's in this place where he can really show us what kind of control that he has. People are joking on Twitter about how, Huni's, kkOma's I told you to pick Maokai. It's but Faker wanted Riven. Good job, Huni, good job. They're making jokes like that about Huni, picking these picks when he's really trying to be a team player. So, I think that we're going to see an improvement in Huni's personality. I think this is my prediction. I think we're going to see Huni get into this environment where he respects most, if not all, of the players. He's going to have to listen to the coaching staff if he even wants to play. There's a replacement for him right there on the bench. They have a substitute, Prophet. He's right there. And so if Huni ever gets out of line, or if he's not behaving like he should be, kkOma can definitely rein that in. And I think that Huni's going to have to go through this personality change. This could be a case where it takes an entire all of spring split for SK Telecom to start out. This could be a case where it takes the rest of the year. It could just click immediately. Huni could just be like, you know what? I'm just going to buy into this program. kkOma, you're the boss. I'm going to do what you say. I'm listening to you guys. I'm listening to my team. I'm going to work better. I'm going to try and improve on these, anger issues or, whatever that I have. And so we're going to see the impact of what happens when a emotional Korean player goes into this strict coaching structure and how that affects and how that changes. And I think that we're going to see a very positive thing. I think that this roster is something that we should be excited about. There's a potential for it to just be wrong, but I feel like it's going to be very much reflective. And if kkOma is not a person who is going to be able to get Huni to work on those problems, fix them, and adapt to the team, then we're going to have like an issue there. Now, as my side mentioned to Peanut does seem to have a bit of an issue when it comes to choking. It's something I talked about in my other video. So, as far as that is concerned, I do think that kkOma could have his work cut out. He's going to be dealing with a player who has a very hard time stepping up when the moment gets really tense and the big game is on the line. And then he has a player who, if things aren't going his way, if he, dies in lane or gives up a kill or doesn't, gets outplayed in some way, that he then gets very emotional, he gets overly aggressive, and he gets punished for that. So kkOma is going to have a lot on his plate for the next season, and he's going to have to get all these players to work. So not only does he have these individual players that he's got who have some issues that he's going to have to try and work on, he has to make all these players come together. This is by far like the most roster changes that SK Telecom has done at the same time. Of course, we do still have Blank on SK Telecom, and we're going to have to see how he's used by kkOma, as well as how Prophet and how Huni are used too. So, but ultimately, this is going to be something I think is going to give us a very important insight into how kkOma controls and what kind of authority he has over the team. Because if he's able to rein Huni in and if these problems go away, I think that we finally get to see a bit about this enigma of League of Legends coaching that has been somewhat obscured from our vision just through very careful choice of words, through very careful, like not really opening up a whole lot. As well as we're also going to see how what kind of happens, and I think I have a good comparison between a Western infrastructure and that Western coaching experience versus a Korean coaching infrastructure, and we're going to have like this definitive data point within Huni and his personality and how he approaches the game in League of Legends to really see that. So watching this move from Huni is something I think a lot of people should have their eyes on. It's interesting, and it's going to be incredibly telling. And it's just another cool thing that I think makes the 2017 League of Legends Korean scene even more exciting than the last.